Welcome to today's episode of Hang In There. This conversation is especially powerful because it brings together two survivors to shine a light on something that knows no borders: abuse. My guest today is Shweta Nema. She is a corporate professional with over 12 years of experience, a survivor of narcissistic abuse, and an advocate dedicated to raising awareness about narcissistic personality disorder. Shweta is also an author and an artist. Her book, Unmasking the Evil, The Truth About Narcissistic Abuse, shines a light on the hidden realities of narcissistic abuse while offering tools and hope for healing. Shweta's work is dedicated to helping survivors recognize abuse, break free from the toxic cycles, and rebuild their lives with strength and confidence. Together, we are living proof that abuse knows no boundaries, that it exists in every country and in every culture, yet the patterns remain the same. We are also proof that when survivors unite, we can empower others, expose abuse for what it truly is, and create real change. Today, we're going to dive into her personal journey, the truths she's uncovered about narcissistic personality disorder, and the empowering message she brings to survivors everywhere. I'm so honored to welcome Shweta to the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation today.
Thank you. I am too. I'm really grateful for your time today. As we've gotten to know each other and prepared for this conversation, one thing that really stood out to me was the numerous similarities in our experiences, even though we come from very different parts of the world. And to me, that's such a powerful reminder that abuse and narcissistic abuse is a global issue. I'd love to start there. Shweta, in your view, why do you think narcissistic abuse is such a universal problem across cultures?
Narcissistic abuse is a universal problem because when we talk about narcissistic abuse, it's in between a spouse or two individuals who are in the romantic relationship. It's much bigger than that. Narcissistic abuse exists within the families, in workplaces, social groups, and even the religious and other community settings as well. It could be a parent who is constantly trying to control his children or her children, a sibling who is constantly humiliating or mocking you, demeaning you effortlessly, endlessly, or a boss who thrives on power games, or someone who keeps picking on you constantly. It could be a teacher, it could be priest, or it could be a community leader.
That's so true. There's more than just romantic relationships involved here.
Yeah, and the thing is, on the outside, it looks, this individual looks very charming and everyone loves them. They know exactly how to win people over. They are helpful, generous, and they are very confident outside. And this is why it is very easy to blind people, and nobody gets to know who's behind this mask. And what's more important to understand is beneath all the charm and control and grandiosity is there is an individual who's deeply insecure.
I would love to talk more about your book, Unmasking the Evil. What inspired you to write this book?
Um, Initially, I never thought that I'm going to write a book on specifically on this topic. Once I got out of the relationship, I started feeling a lot of kind of characteristic traits that are not my own. As my nervous system was healing, and I was seeking therapy at that time, and I realized that I have developed PTSD, I have developed panic attacks, and there are so many things that I was unconsciously doing, an emotional response or something that I can say as a coping mechanism, which is not a part of my personality. And that is when I made me realize that the damage is very deep, and I felt it as a sense of responsibility to spread awareness about this, and that is when I decided to write a book on it.
I feel like with those coping mechanisms and the PTSD, those are all things that, I think all of us can relate to who have been through forms of abuse. And it's really difficult because I had no idea it was coming. It just blindsided me. I thought I had left and I was going to move on with my life. I could just forget it and leave it all behind. And then it slaps you in the face and you start to, like you said, get the panic attacks. And
Right.
It's very humbling and it's really scary because it does run so deep and we need to protect people.
Absolutely. And one of the reasons for me to come up with this Insta handle was, again, awareness. I have seen a lot of DMs pop up on Insta, and it gives them a voice, it gives them a vocabulary, and they do not know how to articulate whatever has been happening with them. They receive a lot of invalidation. And that is when I learned that it's so important to raise awareness around this, to give them the voice.
So true. If we remain silent about it, it's just going to continue and it probably will get worse.
Absolutely. It thrives in silence. And this is the reason, a victim is isolated by a narcissist, so that, they do not get the support that they need. They cannot even talk about this to anyone. And this is how even the triangulation comes into place.
The
Yeah,
triangulation was a new term for me. Could you elaborate on that a little?
sure. So, triangulation is when a narcissist wants to isolate you from someone you have bonded over the period of many years. For example, it could be your best friend, it could be your parents you're close to, could be your sister or your brother. So, they take this individual into confidence and they portray their image as though they are a true gentleman or a very good human being. And in your eyes, they are just bonding with them, and
Right.
they take advantage of this bond and they make you feel as though you are not a part of this bond, and they will constantly compare you with this individual. Oh, your sister is so good, or your best friend is so nice, she is very understanding, she is very calm, and how the way she handles situations, it's why are you not like this? So this constant comparison makes you
Okay.
very insecure within yourself, and you keep distance from this individual. So there they are breaking your bonds, they're making you feel jealous, they're making you feel insecure, whereas they are creating a bond with this individual and they can say anything they want. They have already distanced you from this individual who you are very close with. And this is how the triangulation works. And this is how they build enablers, those who enable their abuse. This is how these individuals thrive. So it's basically a divide and rule strategy for them.
They do a great job fooling other people into thinking that they're one person when you're alone with them, they're completely different.
Absolutely. And this is what makes it a very hidden abuse. And this is the most trickiest part of these individuals. They are very high functioning, successful in their career. They have very perfect image in public. They could be, very renowned doctors. They are CEOs, social workers, perhaps. But behind the closed doors, the reality is something else.
And it makes it really scary. You don't know until you spent some time with them because they're very good at hiding it for quite a while. And then all of a sudden, there are just these very small signals that we might dismiss because we've already began to care about them. Maybe we've married them. And now we're starting to see these little flecks of anger or these little pieces of control pop into our lives, right?
Absolutely. And that's what we tend to ignore because we have not been with these individuals for a longer period of time and we tend to dismiss these traits. But unfortunately, with narcissistic individual, these red flags are very consistent over the period of time. And unless and until we have spent a longer period of time with them, we are not sure as to what is happening in the relationship. And that is when we tend to get confused and eventually build trauma bond with these individuals.
Right. What about the trauma bond? For people who don't know exactly what a trauma bond is or how that works, could you talk to us a little bit about what you found in your research?
Trauma bond is a psychological bond that a victim builds with the narcissistic individual, especially in the long relationship. And so the trauma bond happens when a narcissistic individual showers a lot of love towards the victim. This is usually the initial phase of a relationship where they make the victim feel like they are the love of their life and this is the one that they have been looking for. This is a kind of a strategy to fool them into loving the narcissist. And eventually, when the victim gets trapped in a relationship and they constantly try to fix this relationship, perhaps I did something wrong, perhaps I said something. So that constant abuse, and there are some good times, and then there is abuse. So this is the cycle of intermittent reinforcement, and they keep getting stuck in this cycle of proving themselves and proving their worth to a narcissist.
That's a really good point. And I think one thing that many people and I myself can relate to is just the feeling of where did the person I dated go? These tactics that we've been talking about would never
Hmm.
have occurred to me. My mind wouldn't work that way, so I wouldn't have ever suspected it. And how is this person who says they love me? How are they trying to hurt me? Why would they do that to me? And that's what's so sneaky about it.
Yeah, that's how their psychology is. They just want to break you down, into pieces. It's like a slow erosion. They want to learn about your likes and dislikes. They want to learn about your values, your principles in life, what kind of a person you are, who are your close relatives, and who are your close friends. And they study you. And they are very deeply insecure individual. And this is why they do what they do. So a jealous person will always would want to have what the other person has. But when it comes to NPD, it's a different game altogether. So they want to snatch everything away from you because they cannot be that individual who you are. So they break your relationships. They will accuse you, against your values and principles so that you constantly try to prove yourself. This is how they break you down so that you start doubting your own principles and values, you start doubting your own relationships. And they have something called mirroring. So they want to just mirror all your likes and dislikes, be it, the kind of a music you like and how you dress up and how healthy, the kind of a food that you eat and your healthy lifestyle. And they want to constantly criticize you for those things that you have that are the best part of you so that you start doubting yourself and eventually you stop doing whatever you loved doing.
It's so interesting because it makes you lose yourself. I had,
Absolutely.
right, and you stop having your own preferences and your own opinions. You talked a little bit about in the book how it resembles a cult. And you just have no opinion. You just try to keep the peace and you follow along and agree. And it's
Yeah,
scary.
it is scary. And that's why it is said that post the abuse you want to just focus on rebuilding yourself, regaining who you were before you got into the relationship. And so journaling helped me that way. It just helped me kind of purge those emotions out and help me to look within, connect to myself, and to go back to who I was. And of course it's not a linear process. Healing is you also go through those emotional meltdowns during this process. I mean, I've to the point I had built a lot of cognitive disorders. I mean, I'm still going through a lot of them and I'm still trying to overcome, but it's a very difficult process going back to yourself because a lot has happened, and you are emotionally and psychologically abused. And, some things are just very difficult to get over.
I think one of the hardest things for me was just regaining the trust in myself. And I'm still struggling with that. I still second guess myself all the time. I think that's really common for survivors. It's almost like you're relying on that person that you don't trust but you're relying on them because you have to keep the peace. And the self-trust just gets destroyed over time.
Right, because this is how they program their victims. This is what they do. For constant validation, you need to go back to them. Oh, am I doing this thing right? Because you would be criticized so much into this relationship for very small things, for cooking a meal in a day, or to, just taking a decision to buy something, even though that's, very cheap. You would be questioned, you would be criticized so much for, taking any decisions by yourself, that you're so programmed to going back to them and asking, okay, is this okay, should I go ahead and do this? That creates a doubt in your mind, and you stop believing in yourself that you would be taking a right decision if you do anything in your life. And this is again a calculated strategy.
Right. You and I have talked about the challenges that we've had to endure. We also talked about things like fear and self-doubt, hypervigilance. You
Mhm.
spoke about all these things in your book as well. Walking on eggshells, that's a very common one that people use to describe how it feels, and just
Right.
being on edge all the time. Did you find it difficult to rebuild trust? We're always healing, but like rebuilding that trust and finding people to surround yourself with that you can trust. It's been really hard for me over time to trust people, and trust people with information, and trust people with emotions, and open up.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm still going through that phase, and it's very difficult because when you go through something like this, it breaks you completely, it just scars your soul, and you cannot completely rely on anyone. And when you are into such state, you become very hyper vigilant to these small cues. If someone is trustworthy or not, you perhaps, gain that power to sense the intent of other individuals.
You and I have spoken about the family dynamics that have occurred in length when we've had conversations, and family and friends have such an important role to play here regarding
Mhm.
survivors and being supportive and knowing how to support them. It's so important for survivors to have people they can trust. And we all know how hard that is, but that is crucial in giving survivors the ability to leave and to stay away and then to heal. How did abuse affect your family relationships?
Um, it's been hell for me, to be honest. Because there was a time where not even a single soul who was in my favor. So my ex had completely manipulated everybody around me. And as I talked about smear campaign and triangulation, and that's what he used against me. And it started when I started connecting dots. I realized that this has started long back. He started taking a few individuals into his confidence, and that's how it began. So there was a time when I used to get manipulated by not one person, but several individuals all at the same time. And that had put me into a very confused state. I just couldn't recognize myself. And
Right.
I constantly blamed myself for everything that went wrong, even though I was not at fault. I used to apologize and I used to fix things. And it took me really for about, I can say, 5 to 6 years to completely come to a conclusion as to what it is.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's so confusing when the people closest to you start to turn away, and then you even question yourself more, like, is it me because they like him?
right, right. It takes a lot of strength. I would say you do not know what loneliness is until unless you have encountered a narcissistic relationship in your life. So I was into it for a good 15 years till I could finally gather strength to leave with my child. Because I had received a lot of advices that, I should do this and do that. But no one knows your situation completely because you're the one. Nobody has lived your life even for a second. So you know the best. And I have, in fact, received advices as to, I should just leave my child with him and I should just run away because he might, just unalive you any moment. And I didn't have a heart to leave my child behind, to be honest. And
Right.
yeah, and post separation is another level of abuse. I mean, uh, I would say, along with the family, you encounter a lot of judgment around you. So
Yes.
on your, be it your parenting, be it your lifestyle, or because people will constantly try to judge you as to why it happened, what happened with her. And they completely cannot comprehend, what you have gone through and what it takes for a nervous system to heal. There is a major lack of mental health awareness around us.
I agree. And I think, one thing I've spoken about before is women embracing women and supporting other women. And it feels like
Hmm.
in so many ways, women are almost more judgmental towards each other.
Absolutely, you nailed it. So we need each other, absolutely. What I have seen is, I mean, it was a shocker for me, and this was my recent realization that I have seen women nurturing patriarchy more than men do, more than men.
Isn't
Men
that
would have
odd?
created it. It is odd. And I wonder why, honestly. I mean,
Absolutely.
there is so
And,
much of deep conditioning around this.
right. The conditioning, exactly. And it's sneaky. I made a comment before about how it feels like we are in an abusive relationship with a lot of the government. Just because it feels like the same behaviors of are occurring by people we're supposed to be able to trust with our health, trust with our freedom, trust with our rights. And I feel like we as women really need to come together and try to get that power back. Men also experience abuse. I am not saying they don't. Statistically, more women do. And the fact that women aren't supporting each other is a real worry.
It is indeed. When you approach someone for help, for example, social services, for example, you go to police or, legal system itself, there is a lot of patriarchy around it. It's very difficult to find help and individual who can truly understand what you're going through. There's always going to be a suspicion as to what is a real story, because a narcissist is
Right.
gonna do the same. They are gonna manipulate these authorities, and they are going to tell their side of story. Of course, that's going to be a complete lie. And since they are very skilled at manipulation, people tend to believe them more often than the victims. In my journey, I have been gaslit by a social worker. I have been gaslit by a therapist. So it's extremely difficult for people to understand what narcissistic abuse actually is. People just know it by the terminology, but not as an experience.
Right. Let's talk a little bit more in depth about what narcissistic personality disorder is for people listening who aren't familiar with the
Mhm.
depth of it.
Narcissistic personality disorder is, there are certain traits that you have to watch out for. Lack of empathy being the biggest one. And this will not be seen at the initial phase of a relationship. Silent treatment would be another one. The gaslighting is something, gaslighting and manipulation that you will, see this the major part of their personality. Triangulation, and also a lot of financial abuse. They have a very weird relationship with finances. And so these are the traits, if you encounter in an individual over the period of consistent pattern in a relationship, that is when you can term it as a person has narcissistic personality disorder. A lot of individuals do have these traits, but they have an awareness around it. One of these traits, we have been gaslit in our life by many other individuals, but to have an awareness about what they are doing is a different thing, and having a delusion around what they do is a completely different thing. So this is a major difference between a person who perhaps have one of these traits and someone who has a full blown personality disorder. So these individuals always look out for a victim. someone who is more empathetic, someone who's a giver. So the psychology goes as these two individuals, an empath and a narcissist, they are rooted from the same kind of a dysfunctional family environment. So there's a narcissist who thinks, this has been done to me. Let me just go and do the same thing with the other people. Let me just destroy them. So all of this
It's
happens
learned.
very subconsciously. And
Hmm.
an empath, on the other hand, thinks, oh, this should not happen to anyone. And let me be more empathetic. Let me understand the other individuals. Let me heal them. So now empath comes from a
Right.
very healing intention, and a narcissist comes from an intention to destroy other people. And they have a complete lack of self awareness around what they are doing. Whereas an empath is highly intuitive, they are very self aware individuals to an extent that they can understand what's happening, they can sense the energy of the other individual as well. And this is why empaths are the ones who suffer the most because they always attract unhealed individuals. So a narcissist is always on the lookout of an empath who can, give them more and more and more, and they can take more and more from this person, and eventually they kind of, completely destroy this individual.
It's interesting because there's so much research about why people choose who they choose. And it's a little bit terrifying because there are certain people, like you said, the empaths especially, who are so kind and just want to help people, and they get blindsided with these relationships with these types of people. And it takes a lot of therapy to unlearn that and to be able to recognize that in yourself to the point where you can see what's healthy and what really isn't. And, there's a lot of different aspects that go into that. Like you said, how you grew up, what your family life was like, what your early relationships were like.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I know is people actually choose the other individual based on, the psychological wounds they have. It's very important to understand the kind of wounds and the pattern you have and the kind of partners that you've been attracting. And this is why it's extremely important to have self awareness. And this is when I started to, journal things. And it gives you more depth into yourself that helps you understand your patterns better, to change your patterns in order to attract better people in your life. And, with
Right.
empaths, especially, we see that we lack boundaries. We just want to help everyone, whoever comes, whoever is unhealed. Let's just, heal this individual, give them a lot of love beyond your boundaries. And so it is very important to set boundaries and to understand your own patterns and practice detachment.
You talk a lot in your book about healing strategies, such as self
Right.
awareness and mindfulness and safe support systems. Which healing strategies were the most helpful for you?
I meditate a lot. And that's one thing that I would suggest the audience to do more and more. It's not about any religion. It's just that you need to sit in silence and you need to be in a state of no mind. And what I have realized is the meditation has worked wonders for me. When you get into that space of no mind, a lot of things come to you and your thoughts are well organized. You learn a lot by sitting in silence about your own self.
I try to meditate too. It's difficult to turn the mind off. Have you found that
That's
too?
true. Yes, at the initial phase, when I sit in silence, I used to get a lot of thoughts. 10 years back, someone said this, 2 years back, this happened, oh, I have to cook, I have, this work, that work. A lot of thoughts will come in the mind. But eventually, when you sit for a longer period of time, these thoughts vanish. And this comes with a practice, a lot of practice. There will come a time where these thoughts will vanish and you will reach the state where you will encounter complete stillness of the mind. And this has helped me a lot in many other ways as well.
One piece here that I would love to touch upon with you, Shweta, is just what listeners, survivors, and family and friends, what they can do to help support survivors in their own communities.
I have seen in my experience, they encounter with a lot of invalidation. And that puts them into, the second layer of trauma. And they consistently, get stuck in the loop of proving themselves as to what has happened with them. So I think the very first thing that we can do, or the listeners can do, is to just sit and listen and not dismiss and not invalidate the victims, and guide them through as to, give a helping hand, or just give them out some leads, supporting networks or resources, or anyone who can, give them some kind of a professional help. If you see someone struggling silently, there are no broken bones, there are no bruises. If someone is struggling mentally and they are isolated, just offer them a safe, non judgmental space to hear them out. And you need to listen and validate and not invalidate whatever they have gone through. Apart from that, I think that everyone should educate themselves a bit about how a narcissistic abuse functions. It's a hidden abuse. Educate yourself with the red flags and what are the tactics they use in public. Usually, mothers are there with the kids and they don't have anywhere else to go. Whichever country you are and whatever you know of, in order to support survivor, this is how we should build a support network.
That's so important.
Right.
Sharing stories brings such solidarity and understanding that this is happening across the world to every country. And what
Absolutely.
can
Yeah.
we do to create, right? What can we do to create change here? What's it going to take? I think collaborating with each other and talking with each other and putting this out in the world is so important for survivors and for people who are living in abuse. Shweta, thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your story, your strength, and all of the beneficial information. Your courage in writing Unmasking the Evil and speaking out is both educating and helping so many survivors feel seen and understood. The book is phenomenal. There's so many facts and examples and just loads of really beneficial information. What you've shared remind us that abuse truly knows no borders, but neither does healing. And this is precisely why when survivors come together, change becomes possible and we can help others. To our listeners, thank you for spending a part of your day with us. And please remember, if today's conversation resonated with you, know that you are not alone. There are resources to help, and there is always hope. Your story matters. You matter. Hang in there and keep going. Thank you, Shweta, for being part of this movement and for helping to educate and empower survivors around the world. It's been such a pleasure meeting with you today.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you.